Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Red Zone, brought to you by the Texas Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M University. I'm Haley Reeder-Wiley, Communications Coordinator. Today is Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. On this day in 2018, President George H.W. Bush passed away at his home in Houston at the age of 94. Before serving as the 41st President of the United States from 1989 to 1993, Bush served as Ronald Reagan's Vice President. From 1967 to 1971, he was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for Texas' 7th District. At the time of his death, he was the longest-lived president, a distinction now held by Jimmy Carter. President Bush was interred at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library on the Texas A&M University campus in College Station. He's buried beside his wife Barbara and daughter Robin. Now on to today's podcast. In May 2022, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecasted the 7th consecutive year of above-average Atlantic hurricane activity. As the 2022 hurricane season ends, an estimated 337 people lost their lives due to hurricane-related activity. Additionally, this year's hurricane season has so far caused over $54 billion in damages, making it the 6th costliest Atlantic hurricane season on record. The frequency and intensity of natural disasters like hurricanes and wildfires are forecast to increase throughout the decade, exposing more people and places to these destructive events. Given these risks, the Texas Real Estate Research Center launched When Disaster Strikes, a blog series to better inform Texans of the costs and consequences of natural disasters. The series summarizes important findings from academic publications, including the impacts on public health, economic activity, and individual decision-making. While much of the literature extends beyond natural disasters in Texas, the results are contextualized to the state's population. The first installment, which highlights a paper that illustrates the economic challenges facing households after a natural disaster, was released earlier this month. The author of the series, Texas Real Estate Research Center Senior Research Associate Wesley Miller, joins us on today's podcast to discuss this blog and touch on what future blogs will examine. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What are some of the immediate impacts of a natural disaster on a household's financial health?
Yeah, so we know that natural disasters are quite destructive. They're physically destructive and dangerous, but in terms of financial health, as households evacuate, immediately kind of in the short term, when the storm is happening, there's costs of evacuation from hotels and transportation. This is all at a time when prices are increasing. There's increased demand for these resources, but also the recovery and the rebuilding process can be quite expensive. If you're insured, it takes time for insurance money to pour in or relief from other sources. There's also major disruptions to employment in the labor market in a region where a natural disaster has occurred. So you've got this combination of your costs increasing, but also your sources of revenue and income may be decreasing at this time. And so this pushes people into financial distress, whether that's relying on access to credit, relying on credit or other resources. It's a very difficult time financially. And there's also evidence what this paper does. It shows that there's an increase in early withdrawal of retirement as households are trying to smooth over that financial shock that they're exposed to.
What are the long-term effects of a natural disaster on local and state economies?
It's really difficult to identify long-run impacts of natural disasters, and so actually, what this paper does, they're focusing on the long-run impacts of the individuals themselves who were exposed. So some of those individuals who lived in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina left the city, and that's kind of what you expect from evacuation, but then that evacuation was sticky for a lot of people, and they remained outside and made their permanent residence elsewhere. And Houston is a great example of that, as a lot of people left New Orleans and to Houston and never returned. So one of the kind of big takeaways from this paper and the literature is is somewhat surprising. It's that conditional on surviving this storm, individuals might actually notice some improvements or some benefits from their response to the natural disaster. And so kind of the idea and thought process behind this is that New Orleans was a struggling, stagnant economy when Hurricane Katrina hit. It forced this large population out into different places, into Houston, that maybe had a better education system or healthcare system. And so those people that moved there then benefited from those resources. Now, I think it's really important to emphasize that we talk about individuals benefiting from this experience. That's not a net benefit. This is an incredibly trying and stressful event that can last for years and years. So it's just what the literature has shown is that on some dimensions, there can be some improved outcomes on average.
Are any socioeconomic groups more adversely affected by natural disasters than others? If so, why?
Yeah, so this is still an open question in the literature. Like obviously, we've talked about how access to credit can be important, household savings and other assets, and employment stability. So all these things correlate with socioeconomic status. So those are important factors for sure. One thing that this paper showed clearly was that individuals in the most damaged areas, were the ones that evacuated at a higher rate. That we saw some of the larger income shocks and spikes in unemployment. Now these most damaged areas in New Orleans happen to be the most disadvantaged areas. So it's difficult to disentangle those two things, but in a way they're also related in terms of investment in infrastructure yeah, that's still an open question in the literature.
In the first blog of the series, you look at a study examining the social and economic costs of Hurricane Katrina on the residents of New Orleans. Can you summarize what was found?
Yeah, so this study is really, really cool. One thing that kind of the cornerstone of it is that they have access to federal tax return data from I think it's 1999 through 2013. So they're following individuals and outcomes through their tax returns. And so what they see is a clear disruption in individuals' lives, from a spike in mobility, residential mobility, as people evacuate the city and don't return. They see spikes in unemployment. They see an immediate hit to income. There's a $2,000 decrease in income, just less than a year after Hurricane Katrina. So all these things are documenting this short-term stress for individuals and this financial stress. And kind of on a side note here, another interesting takeaway was actually where they didn't find results. So they document all this financial stress, and then a common measurement of household stress is the marriage and divorce rates, and their results are kind of noisy there. And so while you've got all these difficulties surrounding your lives, they weren't able to detect any effects in either direction really on household stress measured through marriages and divorces. So that's something that might be surprising to some. On one hand, you might expect families to kind of come together during a time of difficulty, and that would increase the marriage rate or decrease the divorce rate. But on the other hand, there's a literature that documents financial stress and other stresses in your life transmit into the household and can affect outcomes inside the household. So that was kind of an interesting caveat in this study as well.
Were any of these trends mirrored by Hurricane Harvey's impact on Houston?
Yeah, so there's some clear similarities across storms. First, there's an evacuation period. Now, the scope of evacuation was quite different. Hurricane Katrina prompted a near universal evacuation of the city, and it wasn't quite so severe in terms of evacuation for Harvey, for better or for worse. Also, there's clear disruption in the labor market that Hurricane Harvey caused as recovery and rebuilding before recovery and rebuilding could occur. So these are things that are common across natural disasters. Houston is much different economy than New Orleans, and so there's definitely some differences that can make extrapolating all of the results from this study possible to Hurricane Harvey. But we'll focus on some other papers later in this blog series that can apply in that regard as well.
What can be done to lessen the social and economic impact of natural disasters?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is communication of risk. And so, Houston's doing this with updating the flood maps so that individuals and municipalities and the entire region is better aware of the actual flood risk that at present, but also improving messaging of this actual risk. It's okay to document the risk, but having this be actually making this salient to the population, hoping that that's influencing decisions. One way that typically that risk is transmitted through through markets is through prices. This is kind of this is a complicated issue because we as a country, we subsidize flood insurance rates, so we're kind of distorting the price mechanism that we'd expect to be communicating risk. There's things like information disclosure, flood risk disclosure for homeowners or prospective buyers during the contracting period. There's disclosure process. All these things are important in terms of communicating risk so that people can make informed decisions and be aware of this. There's also a ton of pecuniary and non-pecuniary policies and resources that pour in after a disaster. An example of this is temporary shelter as people's homes are destroyed. They need a place to live. There's home remodeling and rebuilding projects, and there's a kind of a plethora of all these different. There's a huge basket of all these different policies, and right now the effectiveness of each individual policy is still pretty much being studied at this point. We just know that this is a very difficult time in individuals' lives whenever these disasters occur, and so we want to make sure that the resources that do pour in are used effectively to best help these individuals and also prevent these types of disasters from happening again, or at least mitigating the consequences of these disasters. Look out for the next the next blog post we're going to be putting out. Several of these, they're going to be touching on different types of natural disasters, wildfires, tornadoes, of course, hurricanes, and also a lot of different geographies. So, this is a large literature. There's a lot to learn here, but it's an important topic that unfortunately, Texans and the rest of the country and the rest of the world are forced to deal with, and so the more information that we have about this topic, the better.
Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Wes. For more, check out When Disaster Strikes, available exclusively on the Center's Mixed Use blog. The link is on our podcast webpage and in the YouTube description box. If you're looking for more information on natural disasters, we've linked to several research articles about hurricanes, flooding, winter storms, and more. While you're on our website, check out our research library. It includes a wide variety of research reports and articles. Latest topics include floor plan copyrights, like-kind exchanges, coastal property rights, housing affordability, and more. The link is on our podcast webpage. That's going to be it for today's podcast. If you're looking for more from the Texas Real Estate Research Center, head to our website. That's www.recenter.tamu.edu. There, you'll find the latest data, research articles, news, and more. For more Texas real estate news, subscribe to Recon, our bi-weekly newsletter. You'll get all the biggest stories sent straight to your inbox every Tuesday and Friday. The link is down below. To stay up to date on when articles are published on our website, follow the Texas Real Estate Research Center on social media. You can find us with the handle at RECenterTX on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. For more podcasts like these, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or to our YouTube channel. All podcasts are also available for free on our website. Thanks for joining us today in the Real Estate Red Zone, Brought to you by the Texas Real Estate Research Center in College Station, Texas, where we've been helping Texans make the best real estate decisions since 1971. This is Haley Reeder Wiley, and I'll see you next time. Bye!